back commonly. So starting with the anterior arm, which is the front of the arm. Anterior means front. I feel like I should have explained this earlier. Anterior is front. Inferior is back. Posterior is back. Superior is top. Inferior is bottom, or like, top and like inner parts. So, with the muscles of the arm on the anterior side, we first have the biceps brachii, and they originate from the short head. The short head comes from the coracoid process of the scapula, and the long head comes from the supraglenoid tubercle of scapula. It inserts on the radius, the tuberosity of it. The innervation comes from the musculocutaneous nerve, which comes from C5 and C6. And the actions caused by this, it does elbow joint flexion and supination. Flexion is bringing like your arm toward you. Supination is rotating your arm in one way. So this is pronation, supination. When you hit the whip, you're pronating your arm. Shoulder joint flexion, stabilization of humeral head during a deltoid contraction, abduction, and internal rotation of the humerus. That second part's a lot. And we have the brachialis. It originates at the humerus, the distal half of the anterior surface. So distal is the lower half. So your humerus is like this whole. I should zoom this camera out. I'm gonna zoom the camera out so that way I can point to my body and like teach myself too. Meg, I see you. The human body is wild. Zoom it out. I said zoom it out. Okay. So like hopefully I'm more on camera now. I could also lower the thing a little bit, but I don't want to be. I mean, it doesn't really matter if I'm cut off or not. That's fine. So the humerus is here. The distal part is the lower part of the humerus. What was I reading? Oh yeah. So the distal half of the anterior surface. So the front bottom of the humerus. It inserts on the ulnar tuberosity, and it innervates. The innervation is caused by the musculocutaneous nerve, C5 and C6 is where it comes from, and the radial nerve, which comes from C7 and minor. I'm not sure what minor means in that case. And the action causes elbow flexion, which is when you bring it toward your, like if you're bringing your hand to your shoulder. Then we have the coracobrachialis. It originates at the coracoid process of the scapula. Coracoid. It inserts at the humerus in line with the crest of the lesser tuberosity. The innervation is caused by the musculocutaneous nerve, coming from C6 and C7, and the actions are shoulder flexion, adduction, and internal rotation. Again, flexion is when you bring your arm up over your head. Internal rotation, bring your shoulder in. Adduction, it's out to the side. Hey, look at that. Now we're already up to the posterior arm. That was all the muscles on the anterior arm, not forearm. Forearm is different. Arm, forearm. So now the posterior arm. We have the triceps brachii. These originate, there's a couple spots. So the long head of the tricep originate at the infraglenoid tubercle of scapula. The lateral head comes from the posterior humerus, the proximal to radial groove. Like posterior humerus proximal to radial groove. So proximal means far away. No, proximal means close. Oh, geez, I don't remember. Proximal. It might mean close. I don't know. I'll have to check that in a later study sesh. Proximal probably means close. I don't remember. Future James, don't listen to yourself. Just read this stuff. And it also comes from the lateral intermuscular septum. Then the medial head comes from the posterior humerus, which is distal to the radial groove. Oh no, I was right. Distal is far away. Proximal is close, typically. And then the medial intermuscular septum. It inserts at the olecranon of ulna. Ulna is another muscle in your body, in your arm. It innervates from the radial nerve from C6 to C8, and the action cause is elbow extension, and the long head specifically causes shoulder extension and adduction. Yeah, so I'm just looking at stuff. Then we have the Anconius. Anconius is how I'm going to say that. It originates from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. It inserts at the olecranon of the ulna. The innervation is caused by the radial nerve coming from C7, C8, and T1. And the actions caused: it assists the tricep in elbow extension, it stabilizes the elbow joint, and abducts the ulna during forearm pronation. Now the synergist muscles of the shoulder and arm. So the shoulder, the glenohumeral joint, flexion, antagonists and extension. Antagonists on extension: deltoid anterior fibers, pectoralis major, pec major upper fibers, and bicep brachii, and the coracobrachialis. Extension antagonizes on flexion. So those mean, by the way, flexion, like they work against the extension, and extension works against the flexion. So I would say extension antagonists on flexion. The deltoid posterior fibers, latissimus dorsi, teres major, pec major, the lower fibers, and the tricep brachii, the long head specifically. Horizontal abduction is from the deltoid posterior fibers, and horizontal adduction comes from the deltoid anterior fibers and pec major upper fibers. The abduction comes from the deltoid, all the fibers of it, and the supraspinatus. Adduction comes from the lats, teres major, the infraspinatus, teres minor, pec major, all of the fibers, triceps brachii, the long head specifically, and the coracobrachialis. Lateral external rotation comes from the deltoid posterior fibers, infraspinatus, and teres major, and the medial internal rotation comes from the deltoid anterior fibers, the lats, teres major, subscapularis, and pec major, all the fibers of them. And now that is the arm, muscles of the arm done. Now we'll move on to the forearm. I will